Matthew 8:18-21. Now when Jesus saw a crowd around him, he gave orders to go over to the other side. And a scribe came up and said to him, Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go. And Jesus said to him, Foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. Another of the disciples said to him, Lord, let me first go and bury my father. And Jesus said to him, Follow me and leave the dead to bury their own dead. Okay. Sounds like a printer. My little subcaption here says the cost of following Jesus. So in the first verse, we see that Jesus saw a crowd around him and decided to go to the other side. Mine says, does your version say other side, or to describe a lake or something?
Mine says other side.
Yeah, I'm reading, I think the same one you are. I'm reading the ES, so it just says other side. And I can look at another one.
That's okay. In other ones, it talks about the lake and, or the sea and, going to the other side of where he's at on that. So it's interesting that this whole section, as the editors of the Bible says, the cost of following Jesus, and it describes a large crowd being there. And I find it puzzling because, like, if you were starting a new church, right, a new church work, and you had a large crowd, do you think that the first thing you would do is, once you realized you had a large crowd, is, you know what, let's get away from these guys, let's go somewhere else? To me, that seems to be counter logical. You would think you'd want to make it bigger, right? More successful with it. I find it strange, and this really kind of leads to the point that, when God is leading, honestly, it won't make sense, especially to the world. It just will not make sense what God is directing and guiding to do. It makes no sense here that he's got this great crowd. He could he could really get a movement going, if I can call it that. A real Jesus movement, I guess. Right here. He don't have to wait for anything, man. He's got the crowd behind him. As a matter of fact, he could probably overthrow the Roman government with the crowd that he's got right here. And I'm sure there was probably people thinking, that. But I really do see that there's something else going on here. It's not just about the crowd. Why do you think that he would, mine says gave orders, so why would he issue these orders?
You kind of broke up there, Howard.
I was wondering why he issued these kind of orders. Why would he do this?
It would kind of sift out those that are truly following him, as Lord, or recognizing him as the Messiah, as opposed to just enamored with, going with the crowd, whipped up into the excitement.
Yeah, that's true. Obviously, it wasn't going to be easy getting to the other side, right? I don't know if they took a boat to get to the other side, or were going to take a boat to go to the other side, or if they were going to literally walk around, to get to the other side. Either way, it was going to be difficult. There's going to be a challenge of it. So I think I might have lost Mickey, or are you just very still?
No, I'm here.
Okay. You looked perfectly still.
In the book of Mark, often Jesus by himself would break away from the crowd, and here he's not really breaking away to be totally by himself, but he is breaking away from one size of crowd to a different subset,
Yeah.
a smaller group.
I wonder, was he giving orders to the entire crowd to go, or just a select few?
That's a good question. I always assumed that he was talking to his disciples.
Yeah, me too. And I don't know why it doesn't say that here, that he said to his disciples, do that, but rather just said gave orders.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Um, so in 19, and I probably would put it 19 and 20 are probably paired together, is my guess here. He talks about a scribe came up and said to him, "Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go." I'm giggling because, well, first of all, the scribe, who is, what is not, is an interpreter of the law, right? But not of man's law, not the Roman law, but the Bible, if I can call it that, God's law.
Right.
And we know from even previous readings here, that scribes and Pharisees were not exactly Jesus' favorite friends, if you will. They weren't really best buds, if I could say it that way. There was always a conflict, right?
Right.
Why would then a scribe, of all people, have this, this reaction of, "I will follow you wherever you go"? I'm reading John's.
I think it might even be the answer to the first on 18 is why he gave the order, is maybe just setting up the distinction here of who really is, saying by lip service they're going to follow him versus really are followers.
Yeah. It's interesting that that Jesus probably knew his heart, right? That's my guess here, because of the way he responds here. Because he really just says, really, are you really, really willing to follow me? Have you thought of the cost it's going to take you? And he says that, quote, "Foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head." It doesn't sound like someone who would encourage another one to go, because really I think he's trying to say, there is a cost to what you're asking. Yeah, Jesus, I will follow you anywhere you go. I don't think really he understood that fully, and I think honestly we don't. When we do.
No, and it made me think of the verse in Luke 9:23. This was Jesus speaking. He said, "If anyone will come after me, he must deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me."
Yeah, I absolutely. I think that is. I think there should be a realization that following Jesus actually, it takes more than just being with the group. And I think that's really kind of what this scribe was doing. Is it's like, hey, as long as the group is here, I'm going with you. As long as things are going well, I'll follow you anywhere. And we see that with people who will join a church, join a congregation, and as long as things are going great, they're all for it, they're all in it, and as long as it feels successful, whatever that definition is, they're all in it. But the moment there is a bump, the moment there's some conflict, we're out of here. We're going to look for the next congregation to make it look better, to be better. And I really think it's an important lesson for us, is that we need to understand that there's no surety of following Christ. There's none. I wrote down in my notes here. Let me see. Oops.
In fact, it's going to bring on certain persecutions and ridicule because you are a Christ follower.
Yeah, Yeah, I think that, yeah, you're, you're asking for it, if I can call it that. You certainly are. Yeah, I wrote that it's all about walking by faith one day at a time. And that's really what he was talking about. I'm not going to have a place to sleep. I don't even know where my bed's going to be, Jesus was basically saying. I don't know where my next meal's going to be. Not really. I don't know where any of this is. Um, this is about walking in faith and not walking out of your faith. You've got to realize that what it really means to be a follower, um, is that God's words, wisdom will never be understood by other people, most likely never accepted by other people, and that you're going to have to walk daily in a faith. Something that you don't know what tomorrow's going to be. And I don't think any of us really fully experience what Jesus is trying to say here. I really don't think so. I mean, I'm not. While I don't specifically know what I'm going to have for a meal tonight, I know I'm going to eat, and I know I have the resources and the place to eat. Um, it's assured. So I'm not really walking by faith for my food, if I can call it that. I'm not walking by faith that God's going to provide my food. Honestly, I know it's going to happen.
Yeah.
That it's not like. I don't think we fully understand that of not knowing where your next meal is going to come from. I really don't. Or where would you sleep? I think that's pretty underappreciated.
Yeah, and I think, Howard, is probably, like we've said often, it's because of our Western culture. It's because of our Western way of thinking. It's the paradox of what Jesus was all about, even as it applies to us today. This whole thing about him getting away from the crowd, right? About this, not, he didn't come like you alluded to earlier. He didn't come for a movement. He came for people, individuals. And I think that's what we see here is he was addressing that individually. If you're going to follow me, it's going to cost you something. There's a definite cost behind our decision to want to follow him.
Right.
And
right.
it's something that like we're saying in the West, I don't think we understand. I think it's more. You would see that cost, and we see it if you look in when we hear stories of missionaries that go to third world countries and things like that, where where you truly do not know if you're going to eat that evening, or you're going to have to wait a couple of days before you eat simply because there's no food or whatever.
Right.
So yeah,
absolutely. Okay. And in I find that the other point is on starting in verse 21. Another of the disciples said to him. So, which disciples do you think he's talking about when he says "and of another disciple"? Or is this just a guy in the crowd? I don't know. Is the answer there. But anyways, this other person who is just as uh, pretty much like the same attitude of the scribe, says, hey, Lord, let me first go and bury my father. And I think we've all probably heard the sermons about that. That this guy wasn't really describing that his dad was dead and he needed to go bury him right then and there. Primarily because the culture of that day and even of today is you bury him as soon as possible. That day, you don't wait. Well, let's schedule a couple months from now and let's have our service and that kind of thing. It's
right.
it's done right then and there. And when Jesus responds, he says, "Follow me and leave the dead to bury their own dead." What do you think he's really meaning there? Sounds kind of cold-hearted, if you ask me.
Yeah, to me, there's an immediacy to what Jesus is saying there is that, I mean, the time is now. There's no time to make excuses. I mean, we're really good about making excuses about when, especially when something sounds good. Yeah, I'd like to do that, but or I'd like to be a part of that, but I'd like to commit myself to that, but let me do this first.
Right.
And I think that it's all dealing with priorities, right? Jesus had that I guess way of finding out what people's true hearts are by just throwing out there just outlandish things sometimes, and about phrasing things in outlandish ways that would drive most people away. And I think what he wanted to do was find those that were truly trying to seek and find out who he was and if he truly was the Messiah.
Right.
So I see that in this statement here. It's not so much that Jesus is trying to be cold-hearted, but he was trying to express the idea that, if you're going to follow me, it's got to be the priority.
Right.
In your.
Yeah. Yeah. I think so.
I think that I think priority is the operative word there. I think putting what is important first. Often we will treat our walk with Christ like, yeah, and I'll do this unless there's something better to come along. I'll put it's the old, I don't know if you know this, in Facebook, when you create an event, there's the option of going, not going, and one called interested. So you can say, I'm interested in that. And I think that's the way a lot of people walk in their faith, is I'm interested in doing what Jesus has called us to do, but I'm not going to click the going button. I'm not going to commit to that. I'm just going to kind of, follow along a little bit. And that if something better comes up, if I get a more better option, I'm picking the more better option. And I think a lot of people live their faith that way, and not in a truly committed way. And I think that's what he's trying to say here. You really need to a real committed way. You need to put the kingdom of God first. I mean, really, that's what it comes down to.
I think it's about convictions. Our pastor is in the last couple of men's discipleship meetings that we've been doing is all about convictions, which are non-negotiables. This is the truth, and everything else in life has to revolve around that. I mean, Howard, you hit a point there. We see so often now on Sundays. Yes, I'm committed to church, but you know what? My son and daughter, they do travel soccer, and and at a certain time, summertime or fall or whatever, that becomes the priority. And that's so therefore church is not a conviction. It's a preference,
right?
But it's not a conviction.
Right.
The conviction for our life and what Jesus is saying here is that he needs to be the priority, and everything else around our life, everything else in our life needs to surround that fact.
Right. Our decisions need to be based around that.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's what he's calling for here. It's not I want to be a part of you. No, he has to be it.
Yeah.
And everything else revolves around it.
Yeah. And what I'm seeing here is basically Jesus saying, the reality is that if you commit to follow me, then how do I want to say this? Then I own you. I am the lead in your life, not the other way around where you get to pick and choose. Hey, Steve, could you go to 1 Corinthians chapter 6?
All right.
It's going to be verse 19 and 20.
Okay. It says, Or do you not know that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit who is within you, whom you have from God? You are not your own. You were bought with a price, with a price. So glorify God in your body.
And there's another place that Paul talks about that. I think is in Galatians 2:20.
Okay. Galatians 2:20. Yeah, that rings a bell. Yeah, that could be a song. I've been crucified with Christ. It's no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. And the life I live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself up for me.
Right. And those are the ultimate statements. That's the ultimate following of Christ, I think, is what Jesus is trying to get these disciples to start to understand. That it's, the things I'm going to say, people aren't going to understand. They're going to ridicule you. They're going to laugh you out. You need to understand that you need to walk by faith, and you need to put your priorities straight. There needs to be a number one priority. You cannot serve God and man at the same time. Can't do
Right.
it. Yeah. Okay. Any other insights into this, guys?
That's good.
I think it's a good reminder for us that we are not our own, and our agenda is not our own, and our things that we have or don't have are not our own anyways. It's not our decisions. Not really. I don't think so. Okay. That was a fast time. It went by fast. All right. So what are we praying for, you guys?